and welcome back to the Rex TV. I've been talking about him for a while, but today I'm very pleased to welcome our business partner, Varick Loyer, to this new episode. Hello, Varick. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are
All
you?
good. You look super cozy from where you are.
I am very cozy.
So Varick has been joining Hurrah to launch Hurrah.studio specifically earlier this year, and in this episode we're going to talk about what made him move from Louis Vuitton to Hurrah.studio. Louis Vuitton to Lax TV, it's quite a deep dive. I think people are first and foremost interested to know a bit about yourself. Who are you and what leads you to becoming a producer?
So yeah, I'm a producer. So what I do is I organize shoots and kind of handle the day-to-day and the conceptualization of a shoot for campaigns and projects. I come from more of a traditional advertising world, and now I'm in esports because I've always been a fan of esports, and that's why I'm here.
And so you say advertising, so do you consider that you were doing advertising for the luxury, or do you consider that you were part of the luxury industry when you were working in Louis Vuitton?
I'd say I was in luxury, but working in advertising for sure.
Okay. And so what are so since joining and launching Hurrah.studio, you've obviously started to see a couple of differences between what you were doing before and what you are doing now. What would you say are the main difference, whether it's be in terms of standard or in terms of way working, between what you were doing at Louis Vuitton and what you're doing with Hurrah.studio now?
I definitely say the standards are different just because the actual results that are expected are different. In luxury, we look much more towards the craft and the art direction of a project, whereas in esports, we look much more on the product and the game itself. So that usually leads to slightly lower standards in esports and gaming, I'd say.
Do you think it's when you're saying this, are you talking about core content, live event content, or a mix of both?
I'd say both, definitely both, but more so in live content. Because in live content, what happens is in luxury, they focus again much more on one concept. So, for example, not to get into the thick of things, we're going to focus on one element. So, each time, each event are completely different. Whereas
Right.
in esports, we focus on the brand itself or on the game. So, for example, if it's football, it's going to be about the football, which can have a lot of positive, but a lot of negative too. Positive in the sense that you recognize right away what you're dealing with, but sort of negative because you're lacking the renewing of a concept each time. It maybe looks a bit too much the same.
I think that's really interesting because that's actually an insight I didn't have before this video right there. But it's true that when you think about a luxury event, live event, you think that the show itself, the scenery, everything is meant to be absolutely mind-blowing. So every time they need to reinvent themselves. But when you consider an esports show, the opening ceremony and the first time you're seeing the scenery is also really insane sometimes, but the rest of the event, because it's so long and because it's so repetitive, is rather focusing on the performance and less on the show run. That's really interesting. Probably a bit more, and maybe I'm interesting to have your take on this. Probably a bit different when it comes to gaming event, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And just to be clear, we are getting to those standards, and that's something that's extremely positive. The same standards that you would have in luxury. But yeah, just to get back to your question, in gaming events, it's very much more based on the actual scenery.
Right. So, what advantages did luxury give you to face esports and gaming?
Luxury expects extremely high standard, be it in processes, craftsmanship, and also the concept. So that's something that I'm incredibly lucky to have been put through. I'd say to have had the chance to be put in that case before going into esports, because I don't no longer settle for okay. I always try to go for the best.
Which is interesting because we did decide to set ourselves the goal of elevating the standard of the industries. Also, it sounds super. It can sound a bit presumptuous. It is because of that past that you have, right? So we, in the end, the tagline for our studio is production crafted for esports fans and gamers. Why do you think that those people, so the fans and the gamers, why do you think they care as much about craft as fashion fan might?
I think it goes back to my point before about seeing the same thing over and over again. You love your game, but you won't play it if it's always the same. You need some kind of something new each time. And I think that goes the same way for the videos. And that's why at Hurrah.studio, we always try to find the best talent for the right video. And bringing sometimes people from luxury, the luxury industry, fulfills that. And that's what we're trying to do on top of bringing people from esports at Hurrah.studio.
I think maybe one way to put this into the example, not necessarily talking about Hurrah.studio, is to talk about the work you have done in the partnership between Louis Vuitton and Riot Games. I think people were excited about this because it's probably two of the most craft-centric companies in their own field. But you acting from the inside, how would you say was the experience, and how collaborative were the two part of this partnership worked together to create this craft that we've seen?
When you look at the two universes, Riot Games and Louis Vuitton, you don't really see the similarities at first. But when you dig in a little bit and you look at the characters in League of Legends, for example, you see how crafted and how thought out they are. It's the same way for the way that Louis Vuitton products are designed. There's always a huge amount of work that goes into it. And that was definitely evident throughout this partnership. The way people worked from each party, be it Riot Games or Louis Vuitton or external parties, there was this huge collaboration and this huge amount of craftsmanship that went through it. And that's why it was so smooth, and the result is there at the end.
And do you think that the rest of the industry is ready to commit to, wanting to reach the best craft no matter what? I'm thinking, for instance, we talked about the esports event themselves, the live event, but everything around it, like the media days, the promotion trailer, all of this content is not necessarily, at a luxury-like standard. I mean, I'm talking about the photo shoot of the players. You can always see the same type of poses. It's not super creative. The craft doesn't seem to be always quite there for esports. Do you think it's because of a lack of, wanting to create this type of content, or is it because of the fact that people don't think it's that relevant now for the industry because it's still, finding its own standard?
In many ways, it isn't ready, but it needs to be, because that is what implicates people, players, audiences much more, is of course the gameplay, the event itself, and the craftsmanship. But if you don't have the craftsmanship, you can't attract new audiences. It's that will implicate people. That's the reason people want to work in the industry. And I think there's nothing more positive than having people want to work in the industry for me.
Correct.
It shows that it's at a high enough level to want to have people from all over the place.
So let's talk a bit about Hurrah.studio for a couple of minutes before we conclude this first discussion about the company. So we officially created the company in March of this year, which was a surprising move considering everything that happened after. And yet we've managed to already, attract and work for some really interesting brands. Like most notably, we've worked for Omen, we've worked for Logitech, we've worked for Epic Games or Riot Games. Why would you say that people trust your background story, and what have we proved so far with the content that we've created so far, would you say?
This year was a strange year, I think, for a lot of people, and it put a lot of doubt in a lot of people's mind, and I can definitely include myself into it. When you first decide to take this journey to build a company, there's a lot of doubt. But if you add on to that the current events, it brings even more doubt. But the fact is, even our first objectives that we had from the very beginning, we surpassed them so much. And it comes from the fact that we put a lot of effort, the same amount of effort that has been put in the past in my previous projects, and the people that we involve. We always try to find the best person for the job, and that may be the editor, the director of photography, the team that put the concept together. It's always directed towards our first audience, which is the gamers and the esports fan, but also whilst answering the questions that the clients need answered.
I said in a previous episode that one of the reasons why we decided to launch Hurrah.studio together was because for our agency, more specifically, there was a need to have production people that were gamer and esports fans themselves to not be the agency, to not have a situation where the agency was leading the production because they knew better what the community wanted. Now that we do have a sister company from the agency with Hurrah.studio, do you think that this is true in the sense that now that you and the team working within Hurrah.studio are esports fans and gamers themselves, do you think that the other people you will onboard, like the director or the camera people, do they have to be esports fans and gamers to help us elevate the standard of content for esports fans and gamers?
That's actually a really good question. It's something that we ask ourselves constantly at Hurrah.studio. Will they understand? Will they be able to fulfill the visions? And 100% of the time it has been the case. Simply because we are the middleman between those two worlds. On top of the fact that we put a lot of effort and work into it, we make it so they understand. And we make sure that we get the craftsmanship and the concept right.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I just hit the table with my knee. Maybe just to conclude this first discussion together, we're going to do a specific episode when we're going to, break down a bit some of the content we've created and explain how we worked hard to make this craft as best as we could. That's going to be a specific Lax TV episode for it. But we've already worked for instance, we did a production for Epic Games where we had an editing with footage, archive footage of Pelé, and Pelé was the voiceover to promote a Rocket League skin, right? So in terms of production, we already did quite a big thing, right? A trailer to sell and to best promote, Rocket League skin using Pelé's images and Pelé as a voiceover. between ourselves, we knew that this was the roadmap for 2021, so we arrived there a bit faster than we expected, which is always a great feeling. But has this redefined a bit your personal goal? And if so, what do you want to achieve for next year?
It's a interesting question again, because you always hope you're not gonna peak early. You know, you don't want to be one of those football players that starts being really good at 18s and then has peaked at 23. For me, we haven't quite peaked yet, definitely not. But we've already worked with an international talent in Diplo, and also the amazing and legendary football player Pelé. So it's already like, how do we go higher than this? But thankfully, this was through archival footage, which means, you know, we could accomplish similar things with shooting outside again, because that's something that definitely would have added something.
So the goal for 2021 is to not peak in 2021, but to build the step for the future. Gotcha. Just a small note: Diplo, Varick has been naming it. It's the singer, like the DJ. How do you call him?
Songwriter, producer.
Songwriter, who've done for whom we've worked with, and with Warner, if I'm not mistaken, Warner Music, to acquire the licensing to be able to use him and his music in this video. I think, Varick, that's a good first wrap up around the reasons, and you left Louis Vuitton to launch Hurrah.studio, and also a bit about the things you want to achieve. Obviously, it's a first small dive into your world, and I'm really looking forward to do a bit more episode with you, if you're okay to join me again in Lax TV in the future.
Looking forward to the next ones.
Thank you very much, Varick, and for everyone else, I'll see you in the next episode.